This time of year, exactly 1 year ago, I started an experiment, an ant experiment. I wanted to know what happens if you place multiple queen ants in a single ant farm. So, in the name of science, I did what had to be done. I went out there, collected a lot of queen ants, and placed them in a formicarium with great visibility so we can closely monitor the queen ants themselves as well as the worker ant behavior thereafter. Ladies and gentlemen, you will not believe what happened unless you see it by yourselves. Welcome to the AntsVienna ANT channel. So, whether you are a loyal subscriber or this video's thumbnail just caught your eye, one thing is certain: you are a curious mind. This video is part of an ant experiment series which focuses mainly on the scientific side of ant keeping. Here we test how ants behave under various circumstances and conditions in captivity as our pets. With all that being said, here is what we are testing with the current ant colony. Lasius Flavus ants are said to be oligogynous, polygynous, or to conduct pleiometrosis. Now, we're going to explore all those terms in a second, but here comes the interesting part. Apparently, the behavior of this ant species varies by region, meaning that Lasius Flavus queen ants caught in the UK may behave very differently than those I caught here in Vienna, Austria last summer. Being unable to withstand the tickle of the unknown, I decided to put this theory to the test, as I wanted to know how my local Lasius Flavus variant behaves. Under admittedly lucky circumstances, I managed to get hold of 18 Lasius Flavus queen ants swarming inside a relative's house. So, after I caught them, I started preparations for the experiment. For this setup, I needed following supplies. First, a temporary landing spot for the queens to simulate their nest search in the wild. Second, a more permanent foraging area for feeding later on, and, of course, a nest where the main living quarters of the ants would be. As a landing spot, I used a simple one-way plastic container, which I then connected with a short PVC tube to an Aesthetic Ants medium acrylic ant nest, and for feeding, I went with again an Aesthetic Ants test tube mini outworld, which were all kindly provided to me for the purpose of this experiment. If you happen to be interested in any of these products, you will find a link to the online shop in the video's description, along with a promo code which gives my viewers a 10% discount on the entire order on checkout. So, one after another, I placed the 13 queen ants in the landing box of our setup. The remaining 5 queen ants are kept separately in a large test tube as a control sample. Now, before I explain the terms I mentioned earlier, if you like this video and want to see more of what I do here at AntsVienna, make sure to press the thumbs up button and consider doing a super chat, super sticker, or even leaving me a super thanks if you're watching this later. Your contributions are what makes these elaborate ant videos possible in the first place. So, here are some terms that every ant keeper should be familiar with. Monogynous. Only a single queen ant is allowed per colony. This rule gets strictly enforced, meaning queen ant species with that characteristic will fight each other to the death either directly, or the first workers that hatch will determine which queen gets to live on. Most of the times, when placing more than one monogynous queen in the same ant farm with another, the result will be the death of both. Pleometrosis. Certain queen ant species prefer digging a chamber together in the colony's founding phase. This ensures more brood as well as better chances of successful colony foundation. After the first worker ants hatch from their pupa, however, only one queen will be ruling the colony and the others end up expelled or even killed. Oligogynous. Ants with this trait will not only found a colony together, but will also continue to live together given the right circumstances. Most of the time, queens and workers will end up being friendly as long as your ant formicarium is large enough to accommodate them. So they don't end up struggling to find food resources or even fighting over them. However, there is a limited number of queens that can live together in that way. And finally, polygynous. This breed of ants not only accept multiple queens in the same colony, but will even inbreed and accept the resulting new alates and mated queen ants in the existing colony. In short, there is no limit in how big polygynous ant colonies can grow, since these ants are constantly inbreeding, and dying queens do not mean the end of the colony, but are rather rapidly replaced with new ones. If you happen to get hold of polygynous ants, you can keep them for your entire life and even pass them on to your children if you take good care of them. Okay, that was a lot to take in. To simplify things, let's just say that with our 13 plus 5 queen ant experiment, we want to see how friendly my Austrian Lasius Flavus ants are to each other and if there is any intraspecies aggression, aka how many queen ants will survive. The good news for you is that I've already been watching and caring for this ant colony carefully over the course of 1 whole year and will now be analyzing my results with you. So, are there any guesses? Type in the chat what you think happened during this last year. How many queens do you think are left? Are there any queens left at all? Or did chaos break out? I am seriously curious what you guys and girls think. In fact, let me do a poll so we can all vote and see who is right. Okay everyone, you should now be able to vote. While you place your bets, I shall remind you that on day 1 we had a queen ant count of 8 queens with wings, so there was no fertility guarantee on those, and 5 wingless queens. At least this much should have been fertile. So we have a sum, or better had, a sum of 13 queen ants in this ant farm setup in the beginning. To make things more interesting, I will now show you some footage from the 5-queen control colony in their test tube. Are you ready? Spoiler alert! Here they are. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So literally all queens of the control colony are still alive and well up. Let me mention that all queens I placed in this test tube were wingless, and I've been feeding them well to avoid food struggle and herby resulting fights. This ant colony is very hungry, and they are certainly looking for ways to escape and search for even more food. I'll have to create a little ant farm for them in the future too. By the way, if you, like me, are the crafty type and like to make things yourself, here is a playlist with my expanding list on DIY ant farm tutorials that you can either copy one-on-one or use for your own inspiration. Also, if you have any particularly special or crazy ant farm you want to see me make, just hit me up in the comments. I read and answer them all. Okay, let's now have a look at the poll results and see what you guys and girls have voted for. Wow, that's cool! Now, let's see what really happened, shall we? Here is actual footage from the current, or better say former, 13 queen ant colony, while I guide you through my, of course, highly scientific observations. As previously mentioned, we started off with 8 queens that still had their wings on and 5 wingless ones. From there, 1 week later, on day 7, I noticed that one queen started to distance herself from the rest and was actively seeking a way out. If I have some of this footage, you will be seeing it right now. After 2 weeks, on day 13, the first queen died. Yes, sadly, it was the one that had distanced herself previously and that probably wasn't fertile to begin with. During the 3rd week, I started seeing huge brood piles that were partially even converting to larvae. In week 4, a new trend started to establish itself. The remaining 12 queens at the time diverted themselves into groups ranging from 3 to 6 queens, and instead of a single large brood pile in the center of the ant farm, the brood was also divided amongst those queen groupings. That trend continued for a long time until the first workers hatched. And let me tell you, they changed everything. Like everything. Let me roll out on this. So, I don't know about you, but I generally had the idea that we ant keepers often see the queens as the rulers of the ant colonies. Let me tell you that at least for these Lasius Flavus ants, this is absolutely not the case. In fact, it is far from the truth, very far. So, as soon as the first 15 to 20 workers or so hatched from their pupa, they started to run the colony. Brood was organized, separated to eggs, larvae, and pupa. Also, queen access to the brood was regulated. Strictly, yes, you heard that right. Workers only let the queens that showed the most amount of care tend to and be in close proximity of the fresh brood, aka the eggs and larvae. The other queens, mostly the winged ones funny enough, were reduced to the pupa area or even left on their own. As a response, many of the queens that still had their wings started biting them off themselves, or even workers started to bite off their wings forcefully. Queen ants that did not comply with this were left out, meaning the workers did not feed them. These now isolated queens had to look for food at their own, so I started seeing some queens hanging out in the outworld so they can get to the honey water first as soon as I fed the colony. I don't know about you, but for me, this was a stunning revelation. Not the queens run the colony, the workers do. The queens are treated as brood machines, and only those that are laying enough eggs and care for the brood are fed and accepted. I guess this is the very essence of nature to ensure the survival of the species. To some, it might seem brutal, but it is necessary. Before I get to the reveal, feel free to hit that like icon if you enjoy my content, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any more AntsVienna videos ever again. So, due to the conditions I mentioned, one thing became very clear to the queens. They either had to lay many eggs or take good care of the brood, or both, if they wanted to be in this for the long run. So, as time started to pass, unsurprisingly, the first queens to die were those who did neither of these two things. And afterwards, even many of those who didn't care enough for the brood were left to starve. And by this point, I dare to say that we have finally reached the time where the queen ants that are left are either very fertile or exceptional babysitters, or both. And the number of those queens that have survived this long is 7. The winning number is 7. So congratulations to those of you who guessed it right in the chat. Now we have one last thing to set straight on this stream. Where does all this leave us with this particular pet ant colony? Meaning, should I keep them and continue monitoring them as long-term part of this ant experiment? Do you want to see future video updates on this multi-queen ant colony? Or should I release them to the wild, aka my backyard, as thanks for all the things they've taught us so far during the course of this experiment? I personally tend to keeping them. I've spent so many hours filming, feeding, observing and documenting them that I've grown to like them a lot, and always have to smile when I see many of those little ones waiting for me to place some honey water drops or even a piece of mealworm, big thing, in the outworld. Lasius Flavus ants are so easygoing and thankful for everything that you as a keeper do for them. How can I not like them? I simply love them. I hope we all learn something together by watching this ant colony grow, evolve and flourish over the last year? I certainly did. With that, I thank you for watching and stick around for the many colonies that I still have to cover in their own videos in the weeks to come. Stay safe and take good care of your ants, everyone.